The Miller family lived in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon. Their house, with its white picket fence and a swing that creaked in the wind, had always been filled with laughter, warmth, and the kind of ordinary happiness most people took for granted. Richard Miller, a high school history teacher, was a gentle man with a passion for storytelling. His wife, Elena, worked as a nurse, balancing late-night shifts with her duties as a mother. Their two children, Sophia and Caleb, were the heart of their lives. But happiness, as Richard often told his students, was fragile, like glass. One slip, and it could shatter into pieces too sharp to put back together. The accident. It was a cold December evening when tragedy struck. Snow fell steadily, covering the streets in a deceptive softness. Sophia, excited about attending her best friend's winter recital, pleaded with her father to let her drive the family car. She had gotten her license just a month ago. Richard hesitated. The roads were icy, and he knew how dangerous they could be. But Sophia's pleading eyes, filled with teenage determination, melted his resistance. "All right," he said, handing her the keys. "But drive carefully. Promise me." "I promise, Dad," she said, hugging him tightly before running out the door. Caleb wanted to tag along, but Sophia insisted she'd be fine alone. It was just a short drive. Just a few minutes. Just a promise. Hours later, the knock on the Miller family's door came. A police officer stood in the snow, his face grim. Sophia's car had slid on black ice, collided with a truck, and flipped. She was gone before the paramedics arrived. Elena collapsed to the floor, her screams piercing the silent night. Richard stood frozen, his mind refusing to accept the words echoing in the room. Caleb, too young to fully comprehend, clutched his mother's arm, whispering, "She'll come back, right?" But she wouldn't. The silence after. The house that once buzzed with laughter grew unbearably quiet. Sophia's room remained untouched, her posters on the walls, her books stacked neatly on the desk, her perfume lingering in the air. Elena refused to let anyone move a single thing. At dinner, the empty chair screamed louder than words. Caleb stopped talking altogether, pushing food around his plate, afraid that if he spoke, tears would betray him. Richard tried to stay strong, but guilt consumed him. He had given her the keys. He had trusted her promise. Every time he replayed the moment, he wondered if he could have saved her by simply saying no. Elena, unable to look at her husband without resentment, began working longer shifts. Nights at the hospital became her escape, where she didn't have to hear Richard's quiet sobs in the living room. The cracks in their marriage deepened, and soon, the couple who once shared whispered dreams across the kitchen table barely spoke at all. Caleb's struggle. Caleb, lost in the shadows of grief, began failing in school. Once a bright boy who loved soccer and video games, he now sat alone at recess, staring at the ground. Teachers called home, worried about his silence. One evening, Richard walked into Caleb's room and found him clutching Sophia's sweater, tears streaming down his face. "Dad, why did she have to go?" Caleb asked in a trembling voice. "Why didn't you stop her?" The words pierced Richard like a knife. He wanted to answer, but all he managed was a broken, "I'm sorry." Caleb pulled away, curling up on the bed. Richard sat beside him, but the distance between father and son felt like an unbridgeable ocean. Elena's breaking point. Elena's grief turned into anger. She blamed Richard for giving Sophia the car, and though she never said it outright, her silence was an accusation. She blamed herself too, for not being home, for not insisting on driving Sophia. Her heart carried too much weight, and her marriage was crumbling beneath it. One night, after a particularly brutal shift, she returned home to find Richard asleep on the couch, empty beer bottles on the table. "You think drinking will bring her back?" she snapped, waking him. Richard sat up, his eyes bloodshot. "What do you want me to do, Elena? Pretend I'm fine? Pretend I don't hear her voice every night?" "I want you to take responsibility," she shouted. "You gave her the keys, Richard. You killed her." The words echoed through the house. Caleb, listening from his room, buried his face in his pillow, his body shaking with sobs. Richard didn't reply. He just lowered his head, ashamed, broken, and silent. The distance. Weeks turned into months. Elena moved into the guest bedroom. Richard spent nights grading papers he didn't care about. Caleb became invisible in the chaos of their fractured home. At school, he was bullied for his silence. His classmates whispered about Sophia's accident, and Caleb overheard them one day. "That's the kid whose sister died. His dad killed her." The words branded him. He came home with bruises he wouldn't explain, his heart carrying burdens too heavy for a 12-year-old. Richard noticed but felt powerless. Elena was too consumed by her own grief to see Caleb slipping away. The breaking night. One stormy evening, Richard returned from work to find Caleb missing. Panic surged through him as he searched the house. His son's shoes were gone, and the front door was left ajar. He ran into the snow, shouting Caleb's name. The cold wind cut through him, but he didn't stop. He finally found Caleb near the old bridge by the river, sitting dangerously close to the edge. "Caleb!" Richard cried, his voice breaking. The boy turned, his eyes filled with pain. "I want to be with Sophia, Dad. I don't want to be here anymore." Richard's heart shattered. He slowly approached, tears streaming down his face. "I know you miss her. I do too. But if you go, I'll lose you too. And I can't survive that." Caleb shook his head. "But she was the only one who understood me." Richard knelt, his hands trembling. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, Caleb. I failed Sophia. And I've been failing you too. But please, give me a chance to be the father you need. Don't let her death take you from me too." For a moment, silence hung in the icy air. Then, slowly, Caleb leaned into his father's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Richard held him tight, whispering over and over, "I love you. I love you. I'm so sorry." The attempt at healing. That night marked a fragile beginning. Richard and Caleb began attending therapy together. Slowly, Caleb started speaking again, though his eyes still carried shadows. Elena, however, remained distant. Therapy sessions were suggested for her too, but she refused. The anger had taken root too deeply. One evening, Richard sat across from her in the kitchen, exhaustion written on his face. "We can't go on like this, Elena. We're losing Caleb. We're losing each other." She looked at him, her eyes hollow. "We already lost everything that mattered." Richard didn't argue. He knew nothing he said could fill the void Sophia had left. The final goodbye. On the anniversary of Sophia's death, the Miller family visited her grave. Snow fell lightly, just as it had that night. Elena placed a bouquet of white lilies, her hands trembling. Caleb clutched his father's hand tightly, afraid to let go. Richard whispered, "I'm sorry, Sophia. I'll carry this guilt forever. But I promise I'll take care of them." Elena stood silently, tears streaming down her cheeks. For the first time in a long while, she reached for Richard's hand. Their fingers touched, hesitant and fragile, like the first crack of light breaking through storm clouds. They were still broken, still grieving, but at that moment, they stood together, as a family, though incomplete.